Horrifying moment. 600-pound circus bear Yashka turns on his handler as screaming children flee in terror. A routine circus performance descended into chaos when a massive 600-pound Russian bear suddenly attacked his handler in front of a terrified audience, leaving children screaming and spectators scrambling for the exit. Now let's take a deeper look and uncover every layer of this story on our AI podcast.
Okay, so let's unpack this. I want you to imagine sitting in the front row of a crowded arena, right? You're watching a 600-pound grizzly bear maul in man just like a few feet away from you.
Just right there.
Yeah, right in front of you.
Yeah.
Blood is being drawn. There's this violent struggle happening right before your eyes. And your first instinct isn't to run.
Which is wild.
It is. Instead, you just sit there. You maybe hold up your phone to record it, and you politely applaud.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds totally absurd when you frame it like that.
Right.
But it actually points to this massive vulnerability in how we, process danger in modern society.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into an incident where that exact nightmare actually played out and the terrifying psychological glitch that caused an entire audience of parents and kids to just simply watch it happen.
Right, because we are looking at a very specific event that took place at the Anschlag traveling circus in Olonets, Russia. And the center of gravity for this entire breakdown in human logic is a bear named Yashka.
Yeah, Yashka. And before we really get into what actually happened in that ring, I want to use a roller coaster analogy for a second.
Okay, I like that.
Because usually when you decide to go to an amusement park and get on a massive drop ride, there is this fundamental expectation of a carefully manufactured thrill. Like strap in, the heavy shoulder bar clicks down into place, and you get to scream your lungs out.
But you're safe.
Exactly. Deep down, you assume there are invisible safety nets everywhere. You trust the engineers, the computer systems, the municipal safety regulations. You believe this whole infrastructure is standing between you and genuine fatal danger.
Yeah, you're basically paying for the adrenaline spike of simulated peril.
Right.
But without absorbing any of the actual risk.
Right.
The contract you make when you buy a ticket is that the people in charge have completely sanitized the environment for you. But when we look at the reality of Yashka, that contract completely disintegrates. Because Yashka was 16 years old at the time of this incident, and as you mentioned, weighed around 600 pounds. And I think we really need to linger on that biological reality for a second.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
It's 600 pounds of dense muscle, claws, and literally millions of years of primal instinct.
It's a staggering amount of mass. To put that in perspective, that's like trying to wrestle a vending machine that has teeth and can, outrun a racehorse.
That's a terrifying image, but yeah, it's accurate.
So our mission for this deep dive today is to unpack the anatomy of this specific disaster. We want to understand how a seemingly harmless family outing transformed into this chaotic fight for survival.
Right.
We want to examine the jarring lack of safety infrastructure and really dig into the incredibly conflicting ways the people in charge tried to explain away the carnage afterward.
To really understand how this illusion of safety shattered in the first place, you have to look at the massive disconnect between the biological reality of the animal and the theatrical environment he was placed in.
Okay, yeah.
Because in Olonets, Yashka wasn't being presented as a wild, formidable predator. He was performing this routine called bow-legged and the wheelbarrow.
Okay, wait, I have to stop you there because just the name itself, bow-legged and the wheelbarrow, it sounds like a cartoon from the 1930s or something.
It really does.
What is the psychological goal behind making a massive, dangerous creature perform something so inherently foolish?
Well, it's actually a classic defense mechanism. Historically, humans have this deep-seated need to humiliate apex predators to feel safe around them.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so by forcing a 600-pound bear to walk awkwardly on its hind legs and push a little prop wheelbarrow, you strip the animal of its dignity, sure. But more importantly, you strip it of its biological threat in the minds of the audience.
You neutralize the fear.
Exactly. The audience stops seeing a lethal predator and they start seeing a clumsy human caricature.
It's like putting a clown wig on a great white shark. You're overriding thousands of years of evolutionary fear with slapstick comedy. But obviously, biology doesn't care about the costume.
No, it doesn't.
During this specific routine, something triggered a violent shift. In a fraction of a second, the slapstick act was just over. Yashka abandoned the wheelbarrow, dropped the whole theatrical performance, and lunged directly at his handler, this guy named Ruslan Solojuk.
And the physical mechanics of that shift are terrifying. I mean, it wasn't just a warning swipe. Yashka bit down directly on Soloduk's arm. And the eyewitness accounts emphasize one specific, really chilling detail. The bear refused to let go.
See, that is the detail that just stops me in my tracks. A quick snap or a scratch, that could be seen as an animal getting startled.
Right, just a reaction.
But clamping down and holding on, it feels like a complete structural collapse of the whole relationship between the trainer and the animal.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is that refusing to let go marks the exact second the psychological contract dies.
Wow.
A trained animal performing a trick operates on this script of learned cues and physical rewards. But a sustained bite, that means the script is dead.
The show is over.
The show is over. It is the moment Yashka transitions from a trained costume-wearing performer back into an unstoppable apex predator. It completely exposes the fragility of the handler's perceived authority.
They never actually had control over him.
Exactly. They never had control over Yashka. They only had his temporary cooperation.
And once that cooperation evaporates, the human response to the sudden reality of a 600-pound predator is just pure, unadulterated panic.
Total chaos.
The footage and witness reports describe another circus worker frantically running into the ring and desperately kicking this massive bear from behind.
Just kicking it.
Yeah, just kicking it over and over, trying to get it to release the handler. And it's this incredibly raw image. But honestly, kicking a 600-pound bear seems like trying to stop a moving freight train by throwing pebbles at it. It's physically meaningless.
It is utterly inadequate. But it's a perfect example of what happens when the illusion of control evaporates.
Right.
Humans just revert to the most basic panic mechanics. When a complex system fails, we just swing our legs. We fight with whatever crude tools we have in the moment.
But they did have tools, though. The accounts mention they eventually brought out an electric shock device to use on the bear. And this is where I am genuinely confused.
Okay, why?
Well, if you take a high-voltage electric prod and press it into an animal, shouldn't that, short-circuit its nervous system?
You would think so.
Shouldn't a massive jolt of electricity drop the bear to the floor and end the attack instantly? Because according to the reports, it completely failed to calm him down. If anything, he remained highly agitated.
That's a really great question, because you're applying human physiological responses to an apex predator, and that's exactly where the logic fails.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the handlers were relying on a concept called pain compliance.
Right, the idea that the animal will stop what it's doing to avoid being in pain.
Exactly, but pain compliance only works if the subject's nervous system is currently prioritizing pain avoidance.
Wait, what do you mean?
When a 600-pound grizzly bear enters a state of high agitation and attacks, its endocrine system basically floods its body with adrenaline and cortisol. In the wild, if a bear is fighting another bear or like a pack of wolves, pain doesn't mean submit.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, pain signals a lethal threat. So the biological response is actually to fight harder, to destroy whatever is causing the pain.
Oh, wow. So by shocking him, they weren't turning him off. They were just confirming to his primal brain that he was in a literal fight to the death.
Precisely. Add to that a bear's incredibly thick hide, dense layers of fat, and massive muscle density, and a standard shock prod essentially just becomes an agonizing irritant.
That is terrifying.
You aren't short-circuiting the nervous system at all. You're basically just dumping more fuel onto a raging biological fire, which makes the situation in that arena infinitely more volatile.
Okay, so let me paint this picture. We have a handler trapped in the jaws of an adrenaline-flooded 600-pound bear. Another guy is ineffectively kicking it like a soccer ball. Sparks are flying from an electric prod that's only making things way worse.
It's a nightmare.
This is a scene of absolute uncontrolled violence. And now we have to talk about the people watching this, the audience. Because the physical reality of the arena setup is, for me, the most jaw-dropping part of this entire event.
The infrastructure of this traveling circus is definitely the glaring variable here. When we look at the layout of the Anschlag circus tent that day, there is absolutely no protective barrier between this massive animal and the seated crowd. None.
I just need to pause and emphasize this for the listener. Zero barrier. When I read that detail, I stopped and I had to read it again.
It's hard to believe.
No cage, no plexiglass, no reinforced steel fencing, just open air.
Yeah.
In what universe does anyone rationalize putting an apex predator just a few feet away from rows of parents and screaming children and assume that a polite request to stay in your seat is a sufficient safety protocol?
Well, it goes back to the history of traveling circuses. The entire financial model relies on intimacy and portability.
Right, packing up and moving quickly.
Exactly. Setting up heavy, reinforced steel cages takes a lot of time, money, large transport vehicles. Removing the barrier lowers overhead costs and gives the audience a more thrilling, up-close experience.
A little too thrilling, apparently.
Yeah, the management was essentially relying entirely on that psychological barrier we talked about earlier, the illusion of the trainer's control.
And when the bear shatters that illusion, the audience is left completely exposed.
Vulnerable.
The reports describe an eventual scene of total mayhem. Parents grabbing their kids, screaming, people frantically scrambling and practically trampling over each other to reach the exits as the bear thrashed around the ring.
It is literally the ultimate nightmare. You bring your child to a place of joy and brightly colored lights, and within 5 seconds you are locked in a desperate enclosed space fight for survival against a wild beast.
But here's where it gets really interesting. And this is that psychological glitch I mentioned at the top of the show. Amidst all that blood and panic, witness statements revealed a detail that completely blew my mind.
Oh, the reaction at the start.
Yes. Some spectators admitted that when the attack first started, they didn't run. They sat there and watched because they genuinely believed the mauling was actually just part of the show.
It's surreal to think about.
I want you, the listener, to really put yourself in one of those plastic folding chairs. You're sitting there, you're holding your kid's hand, maybe filming the act on your phone. You see a man's arm get crushed in a bear's jaws. You hear screaming, and your brain tells you, oh, this is some edgy avant-garde theater.
Yeah.
How is that even neurologically possible? Is our modern expectation of entertainment so absolute that we literally cannot recognize life-threatening danger when it is happening 3 feet in front of us?
It's not just a modern expectation of entertainment, though. It is a profound malfunction in how our brains process contextual reality.
Contextual reality.
Yeah, in psychology, there's this really powerful concept regarding the environment you are in. Think about all the sensory inputs of a typical family-friendly circus.
Well, you've got the bright spotlights, the upbeat brass music playing over the speakers, the smell of popcorn, the colorful costumes.
Yes, all of those inputs create a massive cognitive blind spot. When you walk into that tent, your brain subconsciously signs a psychological contract. It basically categorizes the space into a specific file folder labeled safe and scripted.
So my brain literally rejects the visual evidence of a man being mauled to death just because it contradicts the smell of popcorn.
In the very first few seconds, yes. It is a severe form of cognitive dissonance. The brain is being presented with two conflicting realities at the same time.
Yeah.
Reality A is, I'm in a safe place watching a show. Reality B is, a lethal predator is loose, there is no fence, and I might die in the next 10 seconds.
That's a huge conflict.
And reality B is so utterly terrifying and overwhelming to the nervous system that the brain desperately tries to rationalize the violence to fit into reality A.
So it edits the trauma in real time.
Exactly. The brain says, that blood must be fake blood. Those screams must be acting. This is a scripted, dramatic moment. People's basic evolutionary survival instincts are actively suppressed by the context of the entertainment venue.
Unbelievable.
The brain forces the narrative to make sense right up until the violence becomes so visceral, so undeniable, that the illusion finally shatters and the actual panic response is unleashed.
That is deeply, deeply unsettling to me.
Yeah.
The idea that we are so conditioned to be passive consumers of entertainment that we lose our basic survival radar. We just sit there recording our own potential demise because we think it's part of the ticket price.
It's a dark reality of modern conditioning.
But thankfully, the illusion did break. The crowd eventually realized the danger was real and evacuated. The immediate physical danger passed. The bear was somehow contained, and miraculously, no one in the audience was physically maimed.
Which is incredibly lucky.
Very lucky. But the aftermath, the way the people in charge tried to explain what happened, is where human nature takes another really bizarre, almost infuriating turn.
Yes, the desperate need to rationalize the unthinkable. Once the dust settles and the adrenaline fades, the human brain seeks a narrative. We need to explain why the chaos happened, mostly so we can convince ourselves that we can prevent it from happening again.
We want to feel safe again.
Right. And the statements provided by the circus staff offer two wildly different, entirely conflicting explanations for why Yashka actually snapped.
Right. Let's look at the handler's perspective first.
Right.
Ruslan Solijuk, this is the guy who was actively mauled, who had a 600-pound bear clamped onto his arm. You would completely expect him to be furious, right? To call the beast a monster, to demand it be put down.
You'd think that would be the natural reaction.
But his perspective is surprisingly different. He went on record claiming Yashka had never been violent before in his entire 16 years. And instead of blaming the animal's wild nature, he pointed to internal physical factors.
Yeah, he specifically cited the bear's age, pointing out that 16 is quite old for a working bear, and mentioned that Yashka was in poor health, suffering from painful joints.
It is an incredibly empathetic view, almost paternal in a way. Solojuk is looking at this massive animal not as a malicious monster, but as a living creature trapped in a failing body, experiencing chronic physical pain.
And when you think about the biomechanics of what they were asking the bear to do, I mean, if you have severe chronic arthritis in your hips and knees, and a human forces you to walk upright and push a heavy wheelbarrow under bright, hot lights night after night.
The physical toll is immense. The handler is essentially suggesting that the bear didn't attack out of a sudden predatory bloodlust, but simply reached an absolute breaking point of physical discomfort.
The pain of the unnatural posture finally outweighed the conditioning of the training, and the animal lashed out in distress.
Which makes logical biological sense. Even a domestic dog with severe hip dysplasia will bite if you push it too hard. But then we get the circus manager's perspective. And this is the part that just infuriates me.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of acknowledging the animal's declining health, or even taking a shred of responsibility for the incredibly dangerous setup of the ring, the manager immediately points the finger outward. They blamed the spectators.
Specifically, the manager issued a statement claiming that the audience had ignored pre-show warnings to switch off the flashes on their mobile phone cameras while filming.
Blaming the phones.
Yeah. The official stance was that a sudden, bright flash from a spectator's phone is what startled the bear and provoked the attack.
So what does this all mean? I really want to push back on this forcefully because you have to really think about the sheer audacity of this argument.
It's quite something.
Even if a camera flash did go off in the front row, isn't blaming a random audience member a ridiculously convenient way to ignore the structural insanity of their business model?
Oh, definitely.
You brought a 600-pound wild animal into a crowded room full of children, provided zero physical barriers, and then you want to blame the disaster on a tourist who didn't know how to turn off the auto flash on their iPhone. It is next-level gaslighting.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the stark contrast between the handler's explanation and the manager's explanation perfectly encapsulates the conflict at the heart of the entire exotic animal entertainment industry.
How do you mean?
Well, the handler is in the dirt with the animal. He sees the biological reality, the pain, the physical degradation of the bear over 16 years. He sees a living, suffering creature.
And the manager?
The manager just sees liability. The manager's immediate instinctual default is to deflect blame away from the infrastructure of the circus and place the burden of safety onto the consumer. And the irony is, by blaming the camera flashes, the manager accidentally exposes the absolute absurdity of their entire safety protocol.
Wait, how so?
Because if a single camera flash is all it takes to turn a safe performance into a lethal mauling, then the environment was never safe to begin with.
Oh man, you're right.
The manager is essentially admitting that the only thing keeping a 600-pound wild beast from tearing into a crowd of hundreds is an honor system. They are literally betting the lives of everyone in that tent on the hope that no one accidentally hits the wrong button on their smartphone.
An honor system.
Oh, you did.
For a grizzly bear. It is completely insane when you say it out loud. You are relying on the flawless tech savviness of a random, unpredictable crowd to prevent a bloodbath.
It makes no sense.
It's like storing an open barrel of gunpowder next to a crowded campfire, and when it inevitably explodes, you blame a stray spark from the fire rather than acknowledging the fact that you're the one who put the gunpowder there in the first place.
It highlights the inherent, inescapable dangers of keeping powerful wild animals in traveling circuses. The entire enterprise relies on an impossibly fragile margin of error. When you strip away the brass music, the colorful costumes, and the smell of popcorn, what are you actually left with? You are left with a massive, highly stressed, potentially unwell wild animal surrounded by overwhelming noise, blinding lights, and hundreds of potential prey items.
A recipe for disaster.
The mathematical probability of a disaster occurring in that environment is never zero. It is simply a formula waiting for the right catalyst to be introduced.
It is quite literally just a matter of time.
Yeah.
And bringing all these perspectives together, from the handler's unexpected empathy to the manager's cynical corporate deflection, we are continually forced back to the core truth that this entire incident leaves us with.
The animal itself.
Exactly. The undeniable, unchanging nature of the animal itself.
The footage of this event serves as a very stark, very chilling reminder of exactly that. Beneath the degrading tricks, beneath the silly bow-legged and the wheelbarrow routine, Yashka was always a powerful apex predator.
Right.
You can dress nature up in a prop hat, you can train it to walk on two legs, but you cannot domesticate millions of years of evolutionary instinct out of a creature in a single lifetime. A wild animal is always capable of turning on its environment without warning.
You really can't overwrite biology with a script.
No, you can't.
So, to quickly recap the journey we've taken today, we started by examining a terrifying, completely barrier-free attack in a Russian circus ring, where a comical routine instantly transformed into a desperate fight for survival.
Right.
We broke down the deeply unsettling psychology of cognitive dissonance, how an audience's reality was so heavily manipulated by the context of entertainment that they initially applauded a very real mauling.
Still blows my mind.
Yeah, and finally we unpacked the clash in the aftermath between a handler recognizing a physical breaking point in his animal, and a management structure desperately trying to blame their own fatal negligence on a spectator's cell phone camera.
And through it all, we just keep coming back to the sheer scale of the danger that was present in that room. The accounts of the incident mention that audiences were left deeply shaken, wondering what would have happened if that enormous, highly agitated bear, flooded with adrenaline, had simply decided to turn away from the handler and walk the 3 feet into the seated crowd.
It is a horrifying what if that probably keeps some of those parents awake at night. But as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a slightly different angle to ponder based on everything we've uncovered.
Yeah.
We've spent a lot of time talking about the danger the bear posed to the people in that tent. But let's flip the perspective for just a second.
Okay.
Think about Yashka's reality. If a 16-year-old animal with failing health and chronically painful joints is pushed day after day, year after year, to perform a humiliating wheelbarrow routine under hot, flashing lights, surrounded by the screaming noise of a crowd, until he finally reaches his absolute physical and mental breaking point and snaps. At what point does the real monster of the story shift from the animal fighting in the ring to the system that dragged him there in the first place?
Okay, one question for you. Do you think Yashka's sudden attack was simply the result of age, pain, and stress? Or does this terrifying incident prove that wild animals should never be forced to perform in circuses surrounded by large crowds? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.